Time is really confusing. It seems to fly by so fast. At the time of recording, the latest Smash Bros. Game came out 5 years ago, but those 5 years only feel like 2 months or so. I wonder why. The latest platform fighter is out and it is yet another Smash clone. I do find this a bit frustrating because you can make a platform fighter that isn't a Smash clone. One of my favorites is Nidhogg, and I just wish they were all a bit more unique. But Nick All-Star Brawl 2 is a sequel to an already established Smash clone, and it's better than most at hiding it, so I'll give it a pass. I've played the game for about 10 hours and was a pretty big fan of the first entry in the series, so I am very excited to share with you my thoughts on Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2. I'll start off by taking this game at face value and looking at its individuality. As a series, it does stand out on its own in my mind. I know Nick All-Star predates it, but I always think of it as the game that did what Multiverses couldn't. As an entry in the Nick All-Star Brawl series though, this game is about as unique as an Earthbound-inspired indie game that's actually about depression. It feels almost exactly the same as the last one to an incredibly disappointing extent. I honestly think it's because of how much time has passed between them and how little innovation there has been. In comparison, the time between each Smash Bros. Game keeps getting longer, to the point where no two Smash games have initially released on the same console. Meanwhile, the difference between Nick All-Star Brawl 1 and 2 was only 2 years, with both games dual releasing on both PlayStation 4 and 5. And yes, the second Smash game also came out only 2 years after the first, but look at the difference between these two games. Each entry in this franchise stands out with its own innovations, including massive strides in graphical quality. But Nick All-Star Brawl 2 is definitely very similar visually to the first one. It definitely looks different, but not necessarily higher quality. There were some substantial changes to the gameplay, like updated mechanics and movesets, new roster additions, and an entire campaign, but the game ends up being less than the sum of its parts, given the era it was released in. Like, the base roster of 2 is the exact size as the last one with its DLC included. That does not fly in a time where the last Smash game had a roster of 74 characters and brought literally everyone back. This is a bit hyperbolic, but this almost feels like playing the new 2K game. The main selling points are the updated roster and the new graphics, and then they changed up the shot meter a bit, and it came out very soon after the last entry. I mean, it did take twice as long as the average 2K game cycle, and twice as long as it took to go from Modern Warfare 2 to Modern Warfare 3, but still. Nick All-Star Brawl 2 stands out just as much as 2K18 stands out compared to 2K17. In regards to the actual gameplay, it does play the same way the last one does, as most platform fighting sequels do, but that means there is still lots of fun to be had here. The characters honestly do emulate Smash Bros. A little too much. Like, SpongeBob is the Nickelodeon poster boy the same way Mario's the Nintendo poster boy. And SpongeBob has Mario's forward air spike, and Grandma Gertie has Captain Falcon's knee attack that hits super hard when you land it just right. One of the best ways this Smash clone hides the fact that it's a Smash clone is the controls and terminology. Like, they call Smash attacks charge attacks, and if you've played a Smash game on a Pro Controller or Joy-Cons or any controller with the 4-button diamond position, none of the attacks are where you think they are. The only face button that makes sense is the jump button being triangle, but I assume 90% of the player base has already played other platform fighters, and will realize, oh, this is just Smash Bros, and remap the controls to reflect that. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even really bother to look at what they're called because they're pretty simple, but this game's equivalent of Final Smashes are pretty weird. Not only just mechanically, like how they all have the same hitboxes, and those hitboxes are very finicky, but even at face value, they can be really odd. Some of them do make sense, like SpongeBob hitting you during his driver's test, or Patrick smacking you with his house. But like, Gerald's is kind of a deep cut from an episode of Hey Arnold I kind of remember, where he tells a story about a ghost that lives on an island they're going to, and Grandma Gertie just hits you with the train. It's like, alright man, I think I remember that episode where they go in the subway tunnels, but no one in this slice of life kids show ever dies in a brutal train accident. But like I said earlier, the Final Smashes do have goofy hitboxes, but that's a problem this whole game has. There are going to be lots of times where you get hit even though you're behind the character, or you smack them across the face and they just give you that 1,000-yard stare. The bots also have pretty bad behavior problems. When you go up against 3 other bots, even when they're on the hardest difficulty, they don't really fight each other that much. The one I'm actively fighting will lock in and retaliate, but the other 2 will just kind of stand there and smack each other around a little bit. It gets pretty bad in the campaign as well, but in a much more subtle way. Here's this clip, for example, where there are multiple enemies on screen, but I think it might be a little hard to notice, but they're only teabagging, and it's getting kind of loud. The CPU also has problems adapting to attacks, like when it gets comboed. I know combos are mainly executed in a way that locks your opponent from getting out, but why didn't it adapt and get out of this one? The random character selection also has some weird moments. A lot of things like music streaming apps use a shuffle system that isn't a true shuffle, because when they did, it would randomly give someone 3 Taylor Swift songs in a row and it wouldn't seem that random. So now they use a new shuffle system that provides more variety in the playlist. And I think, or at least I hope, that the developers of this game didn't do that and that they actually made the random character selector truly random, because I would hate to hear that an algorithm they made said, let's give this fucking guy 3 bobs. The stages are actually one of, if not the only thing that this game does better than Smash Bros. Granted, there aren't nearly as many and there's no stage creator, but let's be honest, that's hella clunky anyway. But there are very few competitive stages, which was obnoxious at first, but actually adds to the variety much better, as certain stages have variants similar to Smash's Battlefield, Final Destination, and Smashville, as well as a variant with 2 platforms. Not every stage has variants like this, but it's a nice compromise of creating a new version of Jellyfish Fields while also keeping the old one. Okay, so I might get flamed for this, but whatever, I was more of a Disney Channel and Cartoon Network kid anyway. But I was really disappointed by this game's roster. I do like the ones they kept from last time, like SpongeBob, Patrick, Garfield, and Reptar, and Squidward is definitely one of my new mains. But I'm really not a fan of some of the new additions, and a few of them are pretty weird choices. For example, there was one Hey Arnold character in the last game, and it was Helga of all characters. And okay, she's very aggressive, that makes sense. And in this game, there are now 2 Hey Arnold characters. But neither of them are Arnold, the titular character, or Helga. They picked Gerald and the grandma, which, okay, cool, the grandma is like a martial artist, but why is Gerald there? He's just as aggressive as the main character. At this point, why not add Walter from Drake and Josh, or let me play as Gibby? I've literally never heard of El Tigre before, I never watched the Angry Beavers or the Loud House, and Avatar is essentially what Fire Emblem is to Smash. Yeah, there's a big audience and fan base for it, and it's not the most represented franchise in the roster, but it's like the second most, and I have practically no interest in it. The only characters I know are the ones that have a show named after them, those being Korra and that one kid from Avatar. But Azula means nothing to me. I am glad that they kept the DLC characters from last time, like Rocco and Jenny Robot Girl, but why didn't they keep Hugh Neutron? And they have the models for cut characters like Shredder in the game, and they had a fully fleshed out moveset from the last game, so why isn't Shredder back? Why'd you get rid of my guy's cat and dog? Why'd you replace the 2 best turtles with the 2 worst turtles? But hey, if losing Helga is the price to pay so that I don't have to look at that thing anymore, then that's fine by me. There's also only 3 villains in the roster, which is pretty upsetting. Like, there's a model in the campaign for Foot Clan soldiers, and if they made him playable and added a moveset, that would be hella rad. I know making a moveset isn't an easy task, but still, even if they just ported in Shredder from the last game and made no changes, I'd be fine with that, as it would improve the roster size and add more villains. I'll get into the campaign later, but after all that it asks of you, I'm really surprised you don't unlock Clockwork and Vlad Plasmius at the end of it. Like, seriously, however long you think it will be once you start it out, the campaign is 4 times longer than that, and you don't unlock anything outside of the campaign once you're done. It's not really a standard given the fact that you don't unlock any characters at the end of World of Light or Subspace Emissary, but I would have liked some sort of reward for playing through a game mode that tedious. So, visually, this game is a slight upgrade from the last one. And when I say slight, I mean, yeah, it looks different, I guess, but not really anything substantial. It definitely looks good enough for its genre and AA budget, but I do have one small complaint that literally means nothing. They added Jimmy Neutron to the game, and apparently that whole show was a hellscape to work on, where the power would literally cut out weekly. And that's pretty apparent in the visuals. So, I know this is an incredibly stupid thing to ask, but it would have been really funny if they made everyone look as good as they do now, but then just Jimmy looked like shit. I definitely think that the best thing about Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 is that the developers really do care for and love the shows they're representing. I really love how this is shown specifically with Squidward. How one of his costumes is from the best SpongeBob episode, how 2 of his aerial attacks are dance moves from his talent show, one of his attacks is the Krakatoa eruption he burns himself with, and even though it's weird as fuck, they got handsome Squidward in the game for his final smash. Same with how SpongeBob's forward air has the karate glove, his taunt is the chicken thing, and how Garfield uses comic word bubbles for some attacks. There's even a few things I don't fully remember that they added. Like I said earlier, I only vaguely remember a Hey Arnold episode where the kids go out to some island where they're supposed to be a ghost, and they managed to squeeze a reference to that in the game. This game wasn't just made by some development team that was tasked with making some franchise fighter. No, you can tell that almost everyone in every department of the game grew up watching these shows and had plenty of ideas and inspiration for each aspect of the game. Definitely the biggest addition to Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 is the campaign. Notice I said biggest and not best. I really was not a fan of the campaign at all. It was definitely interesting to see that this fighting game had a roguelike game mode, which definitely had some good mechanics, but overall I was very disappointed. And I had practically no expectations going in. I thought I was going to end this review by saying, it's inoffensive, but the campaign couldn't even meet that bar. Let me start off by getting the positives out of the way. When you unlock characters for a second time, you unlock a new mind-controlled costume for them that's usable outside of the campaign, which is nice. The names of the difficulty options are funny. I like the customizable hub. It has basic roguelike features like consumable, run-specific power-ups, as well as permanent upgrades, and it features this game's equivalent of character splash screens. Yeah, real creative, guys. But despite these fun features, the campaign also has plenty of flaws that make me never want to play it again. The first of those being before you even start the campaign when you select the difficulty. The game tells you the campaign is meant to be played on Texas Tough, the second easiest difficulty setting, but I played it on How Tough Are Ya, and it felt like I was fighting level 5 enemies. It was way too easy. I understand that this is a kid's game, but there's a reason why Smash's default enemy setting is on level 3 out of 9. My second complaint is that no matter what you try, you have to play on default controls until you get to the Shadow Realm, where you can change controls the same time you change characters. Now, I am fairly certain that this is a bug that's going to be patched out. It might have already been patched out by the time this review is up, but it was still incredibly obnoxious to deal with and try to work around. And like I said earlier, I imagine a lot of people will have this issue because they'll probably just change their controls around to mirror their Smash controls. Another complaint I have is quite minor, but it is annoying that there's no unique loading screens in the campaign. I understand and prefer the load screens looking like this in the regular battles, but in the campaign, this pink screen pops up every time you load into a new encounter, so get used to that. So now to get into the actual encounters, I'm pretty disappointed with how repetitive it is. I know, it's a roguelike, I get it, I've played a Hades in my day, but every single run in Hades is pretty unique. But Nick All-Star Brawl 2's campaign is very similar to the campaign in Dragon Ball FighterZ. You pick a character, run through the map selecting your fights, which are always either firefights or fighting a brainwashed ally. And then you might come across someone who can give you power-ups, and then it's the boss, and by the way, all the bosses fight pretty much the same. Then you do all of that a total of 3 times, and then you do that 3 times a total of like 4 times, and then you're done. They just keep coming up with these bullshit excuses for you to keep going. And I know it's a roguelike, but at least other roguelikes have enough variety to warrant spending the time to finish the main story. And yes, I did finish the main story, I played through it as many times as they wanted me to. I never want to be a reviewer who releases a review before they've beaten the game. You guys did say I missed out on a lot by skipping Armored Core 6's New Game Plus, but I really wasn't aware that it added that much, and I am considered doing a re-review in the future. But I almost feel bought by Nick All-Stars 2. They made me do the exact same shit 4 times in a row under the guise of a fleshed out campaign. Even if they made me do it twice, if they came up with some bullshit to make me play it a second time, and then just said, hey, that's the campaign. You can keep playing it if you want, but you don't have to. I might have actually liked it, because they wouldn't be buying more playtime by copy and pasting the same shit and masking it as anything else. It feels like the developers weren't confident in the gameplay enough to just show it for what it is. It's a fighting game. No one is expecting shit in the story. If they just called it what it is, I actually would have respected the campaign. But honestly, I have no interest in replaying it. Listen, if you like Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 1 and you just want more of it, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. I bought 3 different versions of The Last of Us Part 1 just because. But if you want an actual new installment of this franchise that innovates and improves upon the last, this is not it. If you don't have the first one, this is probably worth it, but if you already have the first game, just wait for Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 3, or wait for this one to go on sale. I'm giving Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 a 6 out of 10 because it is fine, I guess. It's a pretty good game, but a horrible sequel. And with that 6 out of 10, I'm gonna list 6 better ways to spend your money. You can save 10 more bucks and buy Alan Wake 2 or RoboCop for 60 bones. Or if you can only spend 50 bucks, you'd probably be better off buying Cyberpunk 2077, The Witcher 3, or The Last of Us Part 2. And if you're hell-bent on spending $50 on a AA Nickelodeon-produced game that heavily focuses on combat, buy Shredder's Revenge twice.